Lost Odyssey is a turn-based JRPG released in 2007 for the Xbox 360. Published by Microsoft Game Studios and developed by Mistwalker and Fieldplus. In the early years of the Xbox 360, there was a noticeable lack of JRPGs, so Microsoft contracted a few to be made exclusively for the console. Lost Odyssey was one of these contracted games. I came across Lost Odyssey because of some notable Final Fantasy veterans that had worked on this game, among other notable names and teams. The story was written by Hidenobu Sakaguchi and Japanese author Kiyoshi Shigematsu. Sakaguchi is most notably known for working on Final Fantasy 1 through 10 in various roles as director, story writer, and executive producer. The composer for Lost Odyssey, Nobuo Uematsu, is also the composer for most of the Final Fantasy games. Staff of Fieldplus included a large number of developers from the defunct Shadow Hearts team Nautilus. Lost Odyssey takes place during a magical industrial revolution. Harnessing magic energy has been used to make many advancements in technology. You'll play as Kaim, an immortal who has lost his memories. Kaim forms a party with other immortals and mortals in order to face their painful forgotten memories, confront the threats of changing magical industrial revolution, and deal with the tension and relationships of the neighboring kingdoms. While amnesia is mostly known today as a storytelling trope, I think Lost Odyssey executes this element in an interesting way. With an immortal's past being possibly endless, amnesia allows the story to start in any particular moment, with the player learning details about the characters and the world at the same time as the characters within it. Lost Odyssey contains some interesting theming. The characters' relationships with each other were strong, but the main conflict tended to be predictable and generic, which was very disappointing to me. I got a huge sense of tonal whiplash throughout the game, going from the interesting and grounded take on immortality, with its realistic impact on relationships, to the one-dimensional villain and writing of some of the comic relief characters. That being said, there's still a solid adventure to be had with fun characters and some emotional moments. I enjoyed the cast of characters in the main party. You spend a good amount of time with most of them, watching them grow as individuals, and create new and returning relationships with one another. The story was at its best when the party's strong relationships to one another were explored. This created strong emotional moments in the story that kept me invested in the characters and plot. I like the idea of Kaim having amnesia and starting out being a shell of a person, allowing the dreams of his past to flesh out his character. It's a really cool idea and concept. However, during the events of the game, I had to rely on those stories of the past too much to interpret anything from Kaim. I never felt Kaim had or grew into having a strong personality. Kaim's personality never grew to be more than "we need to go back home." He didn't talk very much, and when he did, it was usually all business. I think that the relationships made with Kaim fleshed out his character and provided some emotion, but I don't think it went far enough to grow his character as an individual by the end. Seth is another immortal, and I enjoyed her character. She's very fun, outspoken, and strong. Seth is put in a lot of situations that allow her to express a variety of emotions. She shows a lot of dimension, and was a character that I could tell had grown by the end of the game. This is what I wanted to see more from Kaim, as they both started in similar starting points, but with Seth going through much more growth, leaving Kaim acting relatively unchanged by the end of the game. And then there's Jansen. Aside from the tonal whiplash Jansen adds to the story, he was by far my favorite character. In a game that leans toward a more serious tone due to its themes, Jansen is the comic relief, and is written unlike any other character in the game. But he was so charming that he became the most interesting character in the game for me, due to how much he grew, and myself always wondering what he would do or say next. The characters that were introduced further into the story also strengthened the strong character interactions and relationships I talked about earlier. From family to kings, queens, and leaders, the characters filled a role and maintained interesting relationships with each other and the world around them. I only wish Tolton had more time to grow. I enjoyed his reserved, introverted character, and even his hilarious, over-the-top outfit. It was obvious what they wanted to do with Tolton, but I felt that the game was over by the time he was utilized, making Tolton unable to bear any fruit from his character growth. The main antagonist's actions didn't grow beyond wanting power and wanting to conquer the world. His motivation for doing so was hinted at, but wasn't really explored. He came off as very one-dimensional, to even acting very comical at worst. I wanted to see how each immortal's life experience differed from one another, and how that could introduce unique internal conflicts between them. I was teased with that potential conflict during certain interactions, but nothing arose other than the one with the main antagonist. I thought that the ending was strange mainly because of how convenient things were tied up. I expected them to go into more detail regarding the Immortals' origins and purpose, and that potential internal conflict between the party. However, a solution was conveniently created for them in the final moments, so it never got addressed. It removed the sense of urgency and their chance to make a meaningful decision. The Immortals' origins and purpose in relation to the Mortals isn't really explored either. I think that's another reason why the final moments felt short to me. I think it would have gone a long way delivering scope and adding context if those ideas were explored toward the end of the game. With the addition of younger characters into your party later in the game, it crossed my mind how cool it would have been if there was a time skip in the story. Since Lost Odyssey is about Immortals, it could have told an interesting story while using the passage of time to age the mortals on your team, and possibly even transform their abilities after a time skip. Unique to Lost Odyssey are more than 30 short stories titled 1,000 Years of Dream, written by novelist Kiyoshi Shigematsu. During moments of story or exploration, events will happen that will trigger a memory within Kaim or the other Immortals. These memories are expressed through text stories with complementing audio and visuals. These short stories were really well written and emotional. They were a nice change of pace from the main plot, and I always welcomed these stories when they were discovered. Of course, if you don't want to view them, they can always be skipped and viewed later while resting at inns. The stories gave me time to relax and kept me from getting too burnt out from the main combat and exploration loop, while still fleshing out and teaching me more about the characters and the world. Some of the stories are optional and can be found when revisiting areas or discovering optional new areas, incentivizing exploration with rewards beyond simple items and equipment. It feels like a meaningful reward for spending more time in the world. Telling a grounded and realistic story about immortality has the possibility to add powerful experiences and add to a unique and interesting plot. The short stories make proper use of these themes and tell interesting stories about the main characters' pasts, and I truly enjoyed these moments. There were so many interesting topics being explored. They talk about the bonds formed between mortals and immortals, and the loneliness that comes from being an immortal as those age around you. How emotional bonds made with mortals last well after the mortal passes away, and how important those bonds are. The power dynamic of being immortal, as well as the effects on the world around them they have as a consequence of that power. They explore fears unique to being immortal, such as being sealed off away from the world with no escape and no end. The fear and pain of confronting your internal thoughts and regrets of decisions made during your long immortal past. These struggles may be unique to immortals, but they were told in such a way that makes them feel real and impressively still relatable. Whether or not you're an immortal, you can still deal with the same struggles, relationships, and fears, and that sadness helped teach me to better empathize with others. These stories follow the individual characters that you play as, each with their own background and experiences. These were the moments that built upon each character's individual life experiences and personalities, and it was interesting finding out how it led them to come to their own conclusions. You can really gain a sense of who they are from these stories. The stories told in 1,000 Years of Dream were the moments of the game I enjoyed the most, and the moments where this game stands out as a unique experience. I just wish I could say the same thing about the main plot story and the events that happened during the main game. I wanted these concepts to be more closely tied to the events of the game. There was a ceremony that took place during a major event in the game that celebrated life and death. It mostly amounted to doing a few mundane tasks, but it was all I needed to feel invested in the moment, and it was a really touching event. If more things like that happened during the main plot, I think I would have looked back on it a bit more fondly. The world of Lost Odyssey feels huge, but not overwhelming. You'll travel from one area to another, visiting towns and other points of interest in between. Towns felt lively and distinct from one another. Lost Odyssey's story is about the relationships between different strong nations, and the visual design of each nation is expressed in its color, building architecture, surrounding nature, and climate. Towns you visit can be used to stock up on items and equipment, restore HP and MP at inns, and speak with the townspeople for a few side quests. Dungeons were open enough to allow a sense of exploration, but straightforward as to not get lost. They each have their own distinct themes and contain their own unique style of puzzles. Most of the puzzles were fun to complete. Taking your time and searching the dungeons will reward you with important material, consumables, and equipable items. Most areas will be visited during the main story, but there are optional dungeons to discover as the game opens up toward the end. Locations are divided by menus, making them feel disconnected. Their location is shown on the world map, so you can start to get an idea where things are located relative to one another. Eventually, you'll gain access to boats that allow traversal through the overworld via the ocean. Even though there's no land travel in the overworld, I feel the combination of the world map and being able to discover required and optional areas via ship travel provided enough scale and cohesiveness. Because there's no land traversal in the overworld, all of the areas you do explore are tightly packed with content, and I feel it complements the game's pacing. There aren't even random enemy encounters while traveling by boat, making sea travel feel mostly a way to discover new areas. If you're returning to an already discovered area, it can always be fast traveled to via the map. As you progress, you'll get ship upgrades that open up more areas, such as the ability to dive underwater, fly, and cross icy and stormy terrain. It gives a good sense of progression, giving you the tools to open up the map. The ship movement itself feels really bad to control. The ship moves extremely slow. Flight feels bad as you move at a consistent speed and you're unable to stop, making it really hard to land in specific spots. Since there isn't much to do on the water but explore, it would be great for the speed and control of the ships to be quick and easy. While on foot, you have a run button, and it doesn't go unappreciated. You can run ridiculously fast, and while it looks funny, I could care less. It lets me navigate areas so conveniently, leaving less downtime. The same can't be said with ladders, though. There's a lot of ladders scattered throughout Lost Odyssey, and climbing them takes a really long time. I hated seeing a ladder, as the accumulated time spent on them really adds up. There was a few times during ship travel where I needed to look up a guide, just long enough to find the entrance to a new area I needed to go. The main quest marker is the same as any other location, but lightly flashes. It's something that I didn't notice right away, leaving me wandering around the overworld, not really sure where to go. I think adding a more clearly identifiable location marker for the main quest would have been an easy fix to that problem. The story progresses in such a way that the current goal is always changing, and will naturally have you move from place to place, or find the means to get to certain locations. These smaller goals help the positive feeling of progression. The game's pacing is good. I never felt the need to grind during the main story. Areas are littered with collectibles, so if you spend a proper amount of time in each area, you'll generally be fine. This natural feeling plays into the difficulty as well. Unfortunately, there's only one difficulty, but I spend an average amount of time in each area, and the new enemies and bosses you encounter as you progress keep things challenging. If you choose to pursue the optional content, you will find challenging side areas to complete, optional bosses, dungeons, and arena modes. This is a game with a lot of party members, and a lot of moments where the party splits up. The game won't tell you, but it's highly encouraged that you level up every party member. Your team will get swapped frequently during the later half of the game, and you could find yourself having to grind during certain story moments when it could have been avoided. With this game's heavy focus on the large party roster and splitting teams during the story, the game would have benefited greatly from having the reserve characters gain at least a fraction of experience during battle. Lost Odyssey features random encounters with really solid turn-based combat, along with a few combat additions that try to make it feel more unique. The skill inheritance is an aspect of this game that adds its own unique style of progression. Mortals gain skills and spells by leveling up as you'd expect, but can benefit from additional skills by equipping accessories. Immortals, on the other hand, learn skills by linking themselves to a mortal's already learned skills, or an equipped accessory, and learning it themselves with enough experience. Once an immortal learns a new skill, it can be set to a limited number of skill slots that expand with the slot seed item. The idea being that mortals will learn more skills, but those skills will be heavily focused on their role, and immortals will start with a very limited space for skills, but can equip a wide variety of skills, allowing them to provide for any type of role as they gather more slot seeds for the late game. This type of progression allows for consistent rewards after combat. If you aren't leveling up after a win, then at least one character is probably learning a new skill. The way Immortals' inherent skills and spells is unique. It encourages you to rotate between characters so that Immortals can learn new skills from Mortals. Immortals also automatically revive in battle after a few turns of being knocked out. It's a nice touch combining story and gameplay elements. That sounds like it would make the game easier, but it doesn't make too much of a difference, as you can still get overwhelmed by some challenging boss fights. That being said, if the entire party is downed, including the Immortals, the game will be over. Revive spells don't come till much later than I expected, but revive items can be bought in mass, so battles never got too hard or too easy regarding game overs in combat. The game's magic system is based on 4 classes of magic. Black magic, consisting primarily of elemental attacks and negative status effects. White magic, mainly for healing and protection. Spirit magic, for stat changes, status ailments, and non-elemental magic. And composite magic, which can combine 2 spells once learned into multi-target or multi-function spells. The way spellcasting works in combat is interesting. Cast time is displayed by a turn number and in-turn order letter. The more powerful the spell, the longer it takes to cast. If you get hit while channeling a spell, it can delay the cast turn. This is a nice idea to balance spells. There's a risk in casting spells, and the more powerful the spell, the longer it takes to cast. It makes it so that the lower tier spells aren't completely obsolete by the time the higher tier skills are unlocked. Do you cast quick spells for consistent smaller damage and healing, or risk channeling a stronger spell, resulting in you being open for attacks for a turn or two? Though in random encounters, most enemies don't hit hard enough, and I was usually fine just going last and spamming powerful attack spells. During boss fights, the damage was necessary, so it only made sense to go for those stronger spells. They tried to make characters stand out from one another by having each one have different base stats, so they can excel in a specific role. Each character has a different letter grade assigned to each stat that can't be changed. However, the game's mechanics give you a lot of room to teach characters every type of skill or spell. They can be learned easily by Immortals through skill link and equipment. And most spells for Mortals can be learned either through level up or equipment in a way that some characters still tended to feel similar to one another. A lot of freedom is good, but it's currently too easy to obtain all abilities on all characters. I think only having 4 major classes of skills bundled up too many skills together and made it too easy for characters to have access to any and all abilities. Especially when there are items that give you access to both white and black magic just for equipping a single item. I think things should have been separated further. White magic could have been just for healing, while buffs could have been in a new class. Black magic could purely be elemental damage, while debuffs could be in a new class. Another way to go about this could be to split up elemental abilities and combine them with thematic abilities related to them, like having a water class with a slow debuff attached to it, and petrify paired with the earth class. This would separate elemental attacks, causing you to approach enemies with different weaknesses in different ways, depending on how you chose your abilities. The game would of course have to be rebalanced around these changes, but it would also make the Immortals late game feel all the more powerful, as they can tailor their skill links to learn very optimized sets of skills. Up to 5 active members can be placed on a team with a formation system that allows you to place your team in the front row or the back row. The higher the HP the front row has, the higher amount of GC or guard condition you'll have to protect the back row, allowing the back row to take reduced damage. The higher the GC, the less damage your back row takes. Your GC will start at rank 4 and drop toward rank 1 as more attacks are dealt and as more frontline allies have fainted. The interesting thing is that enemies can also use this formation system to guard their backline, allowing these benefits to affect both sides equally. Now, I like this mechanic, but it's pretty straightforward in execution. It only makes sense to put characters with the most HP out in the front, and put your glass cannon casters, utility, and healers in the backline. There's no risk or reward to deviating from that setup. It becomes a little more interesting on the enemy side as they also put their casters, utility, and healers on the backline. This forces you to make a choice on whether or not to burst down the tougher front enemies with full damage hits, or try your luck at trying to status or remove the back row enemies before they can offer their support, which I do like. But the game wouldn't even give me that, as status effect spells have really low accuracy. They either never connect or the enemy is immune to status without the game properly communicating it to me, making it more often than not a waste of a turn to experiment with. The formation system remains pretty stagnant through the entire game, as only a few GC related skills will be unlocked. One skill that allows you to heal GC meter, and an attack and passive stat that lets you ignore the wall defense buffs when attacking. It's also hard to regain GC as there's only one skill in the game that can recover it. I think if they used this formation system to add more mobility during combat, that would have given this mechanic a bit more purpose. As it currently exists, there's only one right answer to team formations, and your approach before and during each battle doesn't change with the inclusion of it. There was a single boss with the ability to randomize your formation, but that's just scratching the surface of this mechanic. I would have liked to have seen something similar to Darkest Dungeon, or even the original Persona release, where your character's formation directly correlates to what kind of attacks they're vulnerable to, and what abilities they're allowed to use. You could even add skills and spells that move you, your ally, or enemies while performing an action. You could also have more powerful spells that are only available in the front, providing a benefit to having a glass cannon caster in the front row. This would even allow enemies to do the same thing with attacks that disrupt your formation. These kind of additions would fit into the already existing base system, while giving you more active, dynamic decisions to make, and giving the mechanic more mobility and application during combat. Lost Odyssey contains the aim ring system. Rings can be equipped to characters, giving their basic attacks a short quicktime event and bonus effect. I like these easy, short, but important QTEs in JRPGs. They add a layer of depth and engagement. It's important that these actions are short and easy to execute, as to not draw out simpler battles, and to not turn your actions into a chore by repeating tedious actions numerous times. I think the QTE for the aim ring attack is appropriately simple, and I enjoyed the small engagement. While executing a regular attack, a ring will appear around the enemy. An additional outer ring will appear, and you must hold down the right trigger to have the outer ring shrink. You must then let go of the trigger once the outer ring is over top of the inner ring, and before the timer reaches 0. The closer you get when you let go, the stronger the ring effect is on hit. I can smell the Shadow Hearts influence from here, from the X-Nautilus and Field Plus members who worked on both games. Shadow Hearts has a ring system of its own, but I think the Shadow Hearts attack ring was handled much better visually and mechanically. Shadow Hearts' ring system worked for every action in the game. The sweet spots at the end of the active space allowed for damage and healing to be boosted. There was a risk versus reward in the sense that the closer you get to the end of the active action space, the greater the chance you have to miss. The sweet spots are always at the end, and if you miss, you forfeit your turn. In Lost Odyssey, the ring effect only applies to the basic attack, and if you mess up, you still get your turn and still do damage, you just don't get the bonus effect. Rings can be crafted at any time outside of combat, with material collected from combat and exploration, giving you an incentive to do both. There are NPCs that can combine rings together to make stronger ones, but the execution was a bit too tedious for me to want to pursue. There was no proper guide on how to locate specific materials in the game, and I didn't want to pursue gathering materials for what's essentially a marginal buff to my character's basic attack. After gathering the proper materials, you'll need to find and talk to the NPC in order to learn which rings are needed to be combined. Then you finish talking to him, go to your ring menu, and craft all the rings needed. Then you'll go back, talk to the NPC again in order to combine those rings. Having a ring combining NPC that you need to find and travel back to each time you need to combine rings just needlessly adds extra steps. You could just add ring combination into the same menu, or you could get rid of ring combinations in its entirety by just adding those rings in the creation list with their combined total of ingredients being necessary to create them. In the end, I didn't end up pursuing the stronger rings. They had the ability to be useful, but since they only affect basic attacks, they only affected a small part of the overall combat. The ring system's QTE I enjoyed, but the effects and application itself could have gone a bit further. The current ring system doesn't feel like an incentive worth chasing. I think there needs to be more importance in combat. If they really wanted the ring system to only affect basic attacks, they could have made it so that characters can equip multiple rings to choose from during combat. This would give melee characters more utility to choose their basic attacks, then choose the ring effect that best suits the enemy in front of them. It would also remove the awkward situations where you have an elemental ring equipped that the enemy you're facing either resists or heals from, preventing you from using your basic attack. You can always swap equipment during combat, which is a nice quality of life aspect that can accomplish the same goal, but I like the idea of equipping characters with the tools to deal with each fight before entering combat. I think QTEs, when implemented well, add some fun engagement to JRPG's combat systems. It was welcome here, but it wasn't fleshed out in any way. I think the peak inclusion of mechanics similar to these to strive for would be the first two Paper Mario games. Each type of attack includes a minigame of timed inputs that are clearly communicated, add small risk versus reward incentives, and never take too long or get too tedious. I thought the random enemy encounter rate was pretty generous, which is great, but there was no way to manipulate the encounter rate. Temporarily raising the encounter rate would be great for grinding, and lowering it would be great for focusing on puzzles or movement through the dungeons. Nothing frustrates me more than bad RNG when trying to escape a random enemy encounter. Thankfully, this game does have a skill that lets you successfully flee from battle every time, called Turntail. There's no dungeon escape items, meaning if you want to leave a dungeon to heal and stock up on items, you'll need to walk yourself back out of the dungeon from where you are, so make sure you're prepared. Enemies vary in attributes. There's a total of 4 elements that an enemy could possess, giving them a weakness to the opposite element. Enemies also possess a type, such as mechanical or organic, that basically give them a weakness to players' weapons and equipment that are designed to exploit the respective types as a weakness. Hitting an opponent's weak point amounts to stronger damage output, but won't really change how you play during various encounters. Each level of black magic gives you access to all 4 types of elemental attacks, so the only work you have to do is learn the enemy's weakness and choose the spell they're weak to. Enemies utilize the formation system. Tankier enemies occupy the front, and more fragile caster enemies are in the back line. I enjoyed the equal footing this put against the player as you think about how to prioritize the fight. Bosses were usually very interesting encounters. They all had a minor but unique twist on the combat that made them stand out and made me approach the fight in a different way. It would be seemingly random whether or not I would have trouble with the next boss, but I never needed to grind. More importantly was finding a working strategy to approach the fight with, which is really commendable. To be clear, I think overall I was really hard on the combat. Combat in Lost Odyssey is really solid, and I commend and appreciate them adding unique ideas in the aim ring system and guard point system, among other things. My critical opinion was toward how loosely these extra mechanics are integrated, and how little their inclusion affects the choices you make in combat. This was an early Xbox 360 title, being released 2 years after the initial launch of the 360, and unfortunately you can tell. It's clear the developers were unfamiliar with the hardware. The game's performance can be rough. Lost Odyssey is contained on 4 discs. There are long load times, framerate inconsistencies, and minor screen tearing during in-game cutscenes. Certain scenes will split into multiple camera perspectives, and as soon as it does, the framerate dips. I was able to play the final disc on the Xbox Series X's backwards compatibility function, and it both improved the load times and kept a stable frame rate during all parts of the game. If you have the option to play it on the Xbox One or the Series X, they are the preferred way to play. However, the experience isn't ruined on the original 360 hardware. The framerate inconsistencies and longer load times on the 360 caused a noticeable problem, but not an unbearable one. I loved the cinematography of the battles. The visual transitions into battle look really nice. When selecting actions, the camera shows the character from the side and moves to the enemies when selecting a target. Characters have nice idle animations and spell ready animations. I thought the character models looked really good. The mocap that they use for the facial animation is really expressive. You can really clearly tell what kind of emotions are being shown through the characters, through their faces. When using a basic attack, the camera follows and shakes at a low angle, showing the intensity of the impact. I don't know if I'm gonna be the only one immensely bothered by this, but Lost Odyssey uses a dissolve transition, where one scene fades into the next, and it's the weirdest use of dissolve transitions I've seen. The transitions were jarring and often made me nauseous, by going from one moving scene and fading into another moving scene. I'm not sure why they couldn't have just cut those transitions, or at least had a setting to turn them off. Another small thing is that earrings are equipable items for each character, and they are rendered in cutscene. The problem with that is they consistently sway and look bad when zoomed in, causing a distraction during moments with any kind of gravity. Lost Odyssey features mostly orchestrated music composed by Nobuo Uematsu. I feel it does a really good job capturing the time period and aspects of conflict this game is going for. I'm not in love with the soundtrack, but the battle themes are good, and some of the songs Nobuo Uematsu goes off on, like Battle Conditions, and Dark Saint. And there are some beautiful pieces like Parting Forever, and A Sign of Hope. That complement the 1,000 Years of Dream. I'm also very thankful for the vocal song, What You Are, for giving me a cheesy romance ballad in my JRPG. Downloadable content consists of multiple additional chapters in 1,000 Years of Dreams, powerful accessories, and an option to view cutscenes. I don't like that this type of content, especially a quality of life one in the form of being able to rewatch cutscenes, is locked behind a paywall. However, this DLC doesn't seem to add much value to the game with or without it. The final DLC package, titled Seeker of the Deep, included a late-game underwater dungeon. This dungeon included new enemies, items, and a super boss at the end that requires you to max out your stats and abilities in order to beat it. Seeker of the Deep doesn't add any additional story that relates to the characters or themes. It's solely there for more gameplay if you enjoy the combat and want to work toward maxing out your characters to completion. I was really critical on this game, but it's a solid experience overall in story and gameplay. I enjoyed the theming, and I wish the main plot pulled more grounded themes from the dream sequences. It has a lot of interesting things, like the short stories and combat mechanics that give it an identity. I respect its ambition to include these unique ideas, as they were harmless neat additions that needed to be a bit more fleshed out in order to make a real impact on the gameplay. I'm glad I played Lost Odyssey, but I probably won't be revisiting it. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more like it, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. I also stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/RyanBeardy. Follow me on Twitter at RyanBeardy, and I have a Discord with the link below.